everyone, I'm Jo from Blooms at Borrowdale. I'm a florist in Haltley Clay, and I've been asked by Carol at Green Futures to come and do some videos for you for some workshops. The first design that we're going to do is a wreath, an autumn wreath. We've got some gorgeous selection of autumnal materials, evergreen foliages, berries, cones, teasels, some herbs as well. And I'm going to take you through the process step by step so that you can make your design at home in your own time. The mechanics that we're going to use for the workshop is a copper ring. These can be bought locally from Wilko's, The Range, places like that. They're not particularly expensive, and it's quite a traditional way of making a wreath using the copper ring rather than a floral foam base. So it's a bit more environmentally friendly as well. And to go with the wire frame, we're going to use some bind wire. This again you can buy in little packets in The Range and places like that, especially this time of year coming up sort of autumn winter. And I'm just going to show you how to attach the wire to the frame to start with to get us going. So lifting up the ring and using there's two rings going round here. On the outer one, just make a little hook in the wire and place that underneath the frame. Give it a little pinch to bring the two ends together, and then the end with the reel in your hand, just bind and loop it around the wire, just so you catch in the end, so it looks like this. It will move about because it's metal on metal, so don't worry about that, that's perfectly normal. You just need to be able to see that you've got in the end of the wire so it's not sharp. Once you've attached your reel, you can lay that to one side. So the next stage is to use the moss. You can use sphagnum moss from the garden centres, which you use to line hanging baskets with in the summer months, or any time of year. If you've got a wire basket, you use sphagnum moss, and it's a really good moss to use also for creating a nice base for the wreath. I get it in some quite big sacks from a wholesaler's, and it becomes quite compacted. So and yours will probably be the same. So the best thing to do is to tease it out and get rid of all the lumps. You sometimes get bits of sticks and all sorts of bits and bobs in the moss as well. So tease it out. It also creates more volume. It adds air into it, so you get a little bit more moss by the time you've teased it out than what it looks like when you started. Anything chunky or any sticks of any kind that you don't really want in there. Sometimes you get bits of grass in there. You can take all that out, but you just need to, just with your fingers, just tease it out. The moss comes damp and it holds the moisture really well. And it's the moisture in the moss that we need to try and keep the foliages and the berries and the things that we're going to use to decorate the wreath, to keep them as alive as long as possible. You need to bring it together into like a sausage sort of shape, and then just give it a little bit of a squeeze just to bring it together. Then using your wire ring that you prepared earlier, place the moss on top of the ring. Give the moss a squeeze onto the frame, and I would suggest doing this in sections. Don't try and do the full ring in one go. Just do it into sections. Squeeze the moss onto the ring, and that just sort of forms it into the shape that you want it to be and helps it keep together better for you. Then using the wire, take the wire into the middle of the ring and then back round to the outside. When you come back into the middle, give it a good squeeze to hold it as tight as you can onto the frame. And then moving over to one side, whether you work to the right or to the left, it doesn't really matter, but go over about a ½ inch from where you did before, take it and then back to the middle. So you're going over and back to the middle. Now it is quite important not to lift the ring like this too much, because if you do, the moss will tend to fall off. So you're literally just lifting up the bit that you need to be able to get it to securely anchor. So lifting the wire, going over to the side by about 1/2 inch, and work your way around, giving it that little extra tug as you come back into the centre. And if you think things are moving a little bit or the moss is starting to fall away, just continue to give it a squeeze so that it holds itself together. And by doing that, and by just lifting up the bit that you need to get the wire back into the centre, will hopefully keep the moss in fairly good order for you. When you get to the point where you're going to run out of moss, just get a little bit more from what you've prepared and lay it onto the ring, and again give it a good squeeze so that it forms itself around there and just makes life a lot easier for you. And then continue to bind all the way round. And you'll be able to feel all the moisture in the moss as you're binding. And try and keep the wire on the reel as short as possible. Don't have the wire long, because it becomes quite difficult to keep control of. So try and keep that wire as short as you can so you can keep good control. But as I'm coming to the centre, giving it that extra tug, it really makes a huge difference. And then when you've got to the end, you should be able to hold up your wreath. If you can see turning it to the back, you can't really see the wire frame at all. They are quite shiny when they're new, the wire frames. They will dull and tarnish as they become in contact with the air. So even if you can see a little bit of the frame, which you can in places, just odd places you can see a little bit of the frame, don't worry too much, because as I say, as soon as the air gets that, it will tarnish down and it will become a lot duller and you won't be able to see it at all. So you need a nice base of the moss to be able to base all the other materials onto the ring. Once you've done that, I would suggest any spare moss can just be put to one side so that it's out the way, so you can see the next bit of the process. Okay, don't worry about it looking a little bit tatty. If you've got lots of bits that are coming a bit wayward, you can use your scissors and just cut it and neaten it off. But don't worry too much about that. You need to leave the reel where you left it, okay? So don't bind off, just leave it as it was. The next part of the process is to use some of the evergreens. And we're going to make little bunches, mixed bunches of using the materials that we've got. We've got a varied amount of things here. We've got conifers, herbs, holly, privets. We've got some beautiful rosemary, which gives you some nice scent. But anything can be used. Evergreens are better because they're hardier, they last longer, especially with the cooler weather. They'll last for a long time. Christmas tree foliages, pines, things like that work really well. But we've also got some lovely berries, rose hips, some berberis berries, and seed heads. But anything you can gather from the summer that has died away and it's got some nice seed heads can be used. There's a massive amount of things that you can use. So taking your scissors, we're going to cut down some of the foliage, and you're looking for lengths around 5 inches long, roughly. Don't worry too much if everything isn't. So you need a little bit of everything in your little bunches. So a little bit of herb, a little bit of berry, and the colour of the berries is really autumnal and just look lovely, and a teasel. Okay, get a little bit more conifer. Just to put at the front. Okay, so once you've got your little bunch, it's important to cut with your secateurs or your scissors the ends of the bunch all finish at the same place. Okay, that's really important. So where your wire is on your frame, place your bundle onto the frame, and about an inch or so from the end where your cut ends are, you need to bring the wire over so that you've got that inch of stem left to cover. Take it over and back into the middle and give it a tug, and do that all the way along until you've got all of the stems bound in. And pull the wire as tight as possible. What that will do is it will hold everything in place, but it will also pull the stems down onto the moss so they're in good contact with the damp moss. And then continue to bind once you've gone over the end of the stems. Continue to bind a couple of binds, leaving about a ½ inch in between again, so that you're some distance away from where you left off. But there's probably about 5 or 6 binds to hold all that in place, and it's quite tight, okay? You should be able to give it a little bit of a shimmy and nothing fall off, okay? The only thing holding everything together is this wire, so it's important that it's as tight as possible. Okay, once you've got your first bind in place and your first little bunch, you can then make another little bunch and just repeat the process all the way around the wreath. So take in some holly. It doesn't matter if your bundles are slightly different as you work round, that doesn't matter. You can make it quite varied as you work through. Don't have to be an exact replica of each other. A little bit of ivy. We've got some dried lavender here as well, which is really nice. And again, you get that lovely scent. Foliage is with scent or herbs make a really nice addition to a mixed wreath. Okay, so we've got some rose hips in here as well. Again, cutting the stems so they finish at the same place. Now for your second bunch, you need to overlap the binding of the first bunch. So place your stems onto there so that it slightly overlaps the first one, and then start to bind again the stems from the second one. Go all the way to the end and then continue a couple of 3 binds past, so you're in the position for the next one. So then you've got that nice overlap. You can't see any of the binding that you've done, and we'll just work around the wreath, placing all those in position. Yeah. So just moving on to the next bundle. So I've got some conifer again. The bundles don't have to be the same each time you do them, but you want a varied mix in there. The conifer is a perfect base for anything really that you make. It's long lasting, it's evergreen, it's a really nice texture as well. You've also got some variegated materials in here, as well as some herbs. The leaf shapes are completely different to each other, which makes things nice and interesting. The colour of the leaves is completely different, which makes it interesting. And because they are so different, by putting them next to each other, you get that nice contrast to texture and that nice contrast to colour. So you're looking for a nice mixes of colours, leaf shapes. The rosemary is a similar leaf shape to the conifer, so if you was to put those together, they actually hide each other. You can't see the rosemary in amongst the conifer, but if I was to use the rosemary on top of the privet, then you're seeing that a lot more. You're also seeing this nice silvery effect on the backs of the leaves, which also helps to give a little bit of a sheen and add different colour again to everything else in there. This particular conifer has got some beautiful berries on it, which again bring in colour, but they also bring in rough texture, which contrasts really nicely with the flat, smooth leaves of the privet. So you're looking for a nice mix of materials that contrast together, and then the berries, they just add colour and a real sense of autumn into the design that you're making. Get a little bit more lavender. The lavender is quite dry, but it's nice for scent, but it also picks up on the colour of those berries quite nicely. And then just another piece of conifer. Actually, I use some sage, I think, in this bit here because it's quite nice and silvery. So cut in the stems again at the same stage, so you've got that nice little bundle. And then placing that bundle over the binding of the second one that we did on there. You get a nice overlap. You're hiding all of that wire that you don't really want to see at the end. It also hides the moss, so you can't really see the ring underneath either. Place it on top of there, making sure everything's nice and covered, and then you can use your wire to bind all of those stems into position. And again, about 4, 5, maybe 6 binds, depending. Don't worry about things like this, that'll all get bound in, it's absolutely fine. But keeping your wire as short as possible so that it's easier to control. And a few ways past, so that you're in the right position for the next one. So as you're looking at the wreath, it's okay to have a few bits sticking out and various other things, that's fine. But you're looking to create that rounded shape. It's important to get that quite rounded shape, so keeping everything of a similar size. So when you're making up your bundles, don't have some bundles that are really long and some bundles that are short. Try and keep them as similar length as possible, so that everything ends up in a nice position. So we'll work on the next bundle. So we haven't got any variegated foliage in the one we did previous, so I think we'll put some variegated foliage in this one and just bring that colour through over there. So now that we've got 4 or 5 bundles on, you can see the process that you need to do, and that's just a case of repeating that process until you get to the very end. When you get to the very end, it's a little bit awkward, but I'm going to show you how to finish the wreath off to combine everything together. So it's just a case of creating your little bundles and repeating the process all the way through. Okay, so we've got to the last bundle. We've just got a small gap now to fill for the last one. So I've made my little bundle up ready to go in. I'm just going to pop that just to one side. The last one that I've finished off, we just need to peel back the first one that we did, and you can see that's the gap there that we need to fill. So it's a little bit awkward, the last one. If you've got anybody with you that can help you, they can hold that up out the way for you. That's the ideal solution. If not, it is possible to do it on your own. So taking the wire, you have to do a bind, a lift, a bind, just to get it into the position that you need it to be, and then holding up your first one, you then pull that back as far as you can and slide the last one in, right in, so that it's in that little nook right in where your first one is, and lay it over, and then taking the wire across just to secure that into position, and bind as best as you can to hold everything in place. And you might have to just move the wire and shimmy it round a little bit, but just making sure that you've got everything nice and bound in, as near to the end of the stems as you can possibly get it, by just keep pulling the first one back, just so you can see where you're going. And then when you pull the first one back down again, it then covers the binding that you've just done for your last one. I just pull that wire this side. So now that first one has flopped down, you can't see any of the binding, so that finishes that off quite nicely. And I'm just going to show you then how to finish off with the wire. So what you need to do for this is to make a loop. Take the wire all the way around, but keep that loop in the middle, and as your wire comes back underneath, put the reel through that loop and pull it tight. It's exactly the same as if you was to cast off if you were sewing. So you'd put the needle through the loop. So you make a loop, and I'm going to do that twice. It's always best to do it twice. So make a loop, lift up the ring, the wreath, and put the reel through the middle, and then through that loop that you've created, and pull it nice and tight. Give it a little bit of a wiggle so it's nice and tight. And then once you've done that, you can cut the reel away. Give yourself about an inch of wire, hook the wire over and push it into the moss so that the cut end is nice and secure and it can't hurt anybody or catch anybody. And then that's your wreath.